co-founder of Girl Crew. So we are a social network for women. We're HQ'd here in Dublin, but we're active in over 50 cities worldwide. And we actually started off as a Tinder hack. So Elva, my co-founder, was bored one Friday night and she wanted to go out dancing. Unfortunately, her friends and siblings were busy, so she turned to the internet, but not to Facebook, not anything like that, to Tinder, where it's like a one-on-one, very limited communication. And this was pre kind of any advertising on Tinder, and it was still the kind of heteronormative binary of women can match with men, men can match with women. So she changed her gender settings on Tinder so she'd appear to women and started messaging them, put up a little graphic saying, I'm a woman, I want to go out dancing, who wants to do that instead? And overnight she'd over 100 matches. So she immediately cottoned on to, hang on, this is something here. So she moved from Tinder to Facebook, and that's kind of where the Girl Crew story started taking off. I actually came across it myself on Tinder, and similar thing, a lot of my friends had emigrated. I was kind of in my social circle in Dublin has started to dwindle, and I was just looking for something new, looking for a new way to meet people, and it just seemed like the perfect opportunity. Now, a lot of people were like, stranger danger, don't go meeting people off the internet, but regardless, I went, and it actually turned out to be phenomenal. I just walked into this space in Casey Peaches, and it was a lovely day, and everyone was there for the common purpose. Everyone was there for the same reason, so there was no real kind of, there's a bit of nervousness, but you know these people are here to meet people too. So you're not really kind of, there's that kind of fear factor is a bit diminished. So we kind of started growing it in Dublin initially, and then people started asking us for it in other locations. So we got requests all over Australia and in London and into the States and into Canada. And really the requests were coming in much more organically than we could kind of fulfill. There was 3 of us working on it at that stage, but we were doing this part-time alongside our full-time jobs. But I guess as we were kind of going through it, we started kind of drilling down into what we were there for and why we were there. So I kind of came up with a couple little pillars, I guess, that we'll kind of go through, and then just some of the other points if you're building your own community, just things to kind of keep in mind. So the first one will be to define the purpose, which is the why. The second is create the space, which is the how. The third is the create the culture, which is the who, and the fourth is what next and the where. So I guess if you're thinking about starting a community or you have a community, the first thing that you really need to drill down into is, why do I have this? What purpose does this serve? Why do I need to build a community as opposed to just building a Facebook page? Why do I need to build a community as opposed to just having a really interesting blog that people are commenting on? If you're thinking of developing this further than just a content model, then you need to be thinking about these kinds of things. In what context does this community fit in the wider landscape, in the wider ecosystem of the industry that I'm in? Regardless of what industry you're in, it's likely that you are involved in other networks. It's likely that you know other people who are in a similar vein. And actually, as I've kind of been going through Girl Crew, the one thing that's been most useful for me is not sticking within my industry niche. I've started going to a lot of design events in particular, and getting those kind of design thinking processes and those kinds of elements from outside your industry can be very useful, because you'll meet people on a similar plane, and that's kind of what we built our community around. It wasn't around anything in particular except for gender, but the second thing was the ideology and the niche. So that's the kind of the who part. But before we jump onto the who, you need to think about the how. So you have your why, you have why I've decided to do this, why a community is the right fit, why I'm the right person to build this as well. That's also something to take into consideration, because once you start to build a community, it kind of gets bigger than yourself. If you don't allow it to get bigger than yourself, then you've created a cult, which is a very different thing. And I mean, you know, it's questionable results when you start to go into the cult vein. So you generally try to steer away from that. But you need to think about the how. So then, what's the best platform to do this? Where are these people with similar tastes, similar ideologies, similar demographics? Where are they? Where's the best people to reach them? For us, building that was Facebook. It was the obvious choice. It's a free platform, very little kind of barrier to entry in terms of all you need to have is internet access. Nearly everyone at this point in our target market has Facebook and has some level of familiarity with it. So in terms of the cognitive load for someone to join the community, it was basically nil. The only thing they had to do was actually be approved, because we set our communities to closed. But then again, we were thinking about this, okay, so Facebook is the obvious choice, but how do we get people from other networks that maybe they don't use Facebook a lot? So we need to start building our profile outwards. So that's when you start to market yourself. So we added obviously our own HQ Facebook page, we added a HQ Twitter, we added a website, we added all these kind of different elements that were driving people back towards the community. All the content that we're spreading out all had that singular purpose. It was all around doing things, meeting people, getting out there, being the best you that you can be, building self-confidence, getting the tools you need to succeed. All those things were driving back to a singular platform at the time, which was Girl Crew Dublin. So as the community started to grow, people started like pushing out the boundaries of space and kind of testing what we wanted to do. We were a very close-knit community, and that was kind of done very purposefully. But one Valentine's, actually, yes, it must have been in around Valentine's, we decided to play a Tinder prank. We started on Tinder, so we thought, why not? And the idea was that everyone, or as many people as we could get, would change their profile picture on Tinder to be Mary Robinson. And no, it was in August because the courts were closed, sorry. Everyone would change their picture on Tinder to be Mary Robinson, and we would all pretend to be Mary Robinson, and everyone would pretend to be the one true Mary Robinson and speak to matches on Tinder as if we were the correct and that any others were fake and not to be spoken to. So as these things do, it got into Reddit and people started to bubble about, like, why, like, I'm matching with so many Mary Robinsons, what is going on? And it got to the point where journalists started digging into it a little bit, and there was kind of a press piece issued, and because the courts were closed, it was Snow News Day, people had nothing else to do but write about why Mary Robinson was Tinder. And that sparked her press office releasing a statement saying Mary Robinson is not, in fact, on Tinder, and to ignore any kind of scurrilous people that you come across. So immediately, people are like, hang on, first of all, why is Mary Robinson's press office releasing this statement? Why would Mary Robinson be on Tinder? Who is doing this? And that started journalists kind of putting the spotlight on us. So that was our first press release. We didn't plan for it to happen. We didn't expect for it to happen. We kind of thought this will be a bit of a laugh and it's not going to go any further than us. But, you know, the internet has legs, so it's just something to think about. But that brought us back to the who. So immediately we had to create this culture that was a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It was a little bit kind of on the edge. It was all about bringing women together under whatever reason we wanted, whether it was jokes, whether it was works, whether it was about them being entrepreneurs, bloggers, mums. We just started to spread out the who so that we were always pushing out on the fringes of our community and getting more and more women basically involved. And the idea was always that once you were a female or non-binary or trans, or you started to grow, you were welcome. We started off initially at 25 plus, which immediately set the culture. And I'll kind of talk about culture a little bit later. But once we kind of have set that, we knew that this is where we were. And we made a very clear stance on that. It's actually, I would kind of disagree with David a little bit in that we've always taken a very polarizing stance on everything we've done as a community. First of all, we're female only, so that's incredibly polarizing. We've initially said 50% of the population, no thank you. The second thing is we've always pushed in terms of social issues, particularly around education and around repeal. Our company came out publicly and made a statement that we were pro-repeal, very heavily pro-repeal, and we actually started interviewing people in the arts and the culture and the workspace and getting their voices and adding their voices, and we wrote a lot of think pieces around it, and we're kind of educating the community around that. Then we started partnering with companies and organizations. So one of my favorite partnerships that we've done so far is we partnered with Inner City Helping the Homeless. So this is a grassroots volunteer-led organization, and we kind of decided that we wanted to be able to give back in all the communities that we were getting money from. So for premium subscription, if you're full price premium, 10% of your subscription fee goes to Inner City Helping. But we wanted to kind of do a bit more. So I actually started volunteering with them. And just kind of getting the inside track. We started writing think pieces around that, and again then we did a huge kind of fundraising drive at a company level. So again, it was our members coming together to support the kind of grassroots organizations and just the issues that are facing us all. But we got that from the community, so we're able to glean the insights of people are talking about these different trends, and we kind of repurpose the content and change our own pitch and our own tone and our own messaging to kind of build around that. So I guess the three things that you're really kind of looking to do, and actually I was at the Chris Doe thing earlier today, which was just phenomenal, and he has a whole kind of database of stuff on YouTube that's worth checking out. But it really kind of ties back into that idea of know, like, trust. So do people know about you? Do people like you? Do people trust you? And once you get into that trust piece, you start getting into the loyalty piece when you start building out, as Kevin Kelly says, the 1,000 super fans. They're the people that will pay anything to get involved. They're the people that will be the first one liking everything, sharing everything, getting that kind of into that super user vein. So for us, the super users became community managers initially, and then kind of community ambassadors. We've kind of changed their profile within the community as we've gone on, but they've always had a slightly elevated status within the community. So they have a different kind of private group that we've rewarded with them. We always tell them about features first. We always kind of get feedback from them. We've had them beta test parts of the product. We've sent them out swag. We do a community ambassador of the season type awards type thing. So the idea really is that the more you put into the community, the more you're getting out. And actually what surprised us was that initially some people were volunteering a good, I want to say like 30 hours a week, unpaid time, to moderating, deleting spam, approving member requests, doing all these things because they loved the community. They wanted to be involved in it, they wanted to see it grow, and they saw the need for it, which is most important. That similar thing has also happened with boards.ie, so they have a huge, obviously, in terms of content, just like vast amount of content. But they also have a moderation system, and most of the kind of large forums will have something similar, either an upvote system or a super user or ambassador, or whatever phrasing you kind of want to put on it. But similarly, when they started changing from moderators, they started rewarding them as we do, but like with events and kind of that offline piece, so moderators start to know each other in real life. But once they offered to pay, immediately, boom, a moderation just fell through the floor. Because what they had actually done is they'd broken the trust. The trust for their ambassadors and then for their moderators was, what I put in, I get out. I get a gravitas, I get a little star beside my name, I get a badge, I get a different strike under my profile, whatever way you want to differentiate people. But once you break that relationship and change the terms, then you're starting again from scratch. So offering payment in the terms of boards.ie actually had a negative impact, and rather than incentivizing people to work harder, they just were totally put off the idea. What they enjoyed doing was doing something for the benefit of the community without any kind of reward. So they're kind of the people that then you start to hook into. So once you kind of have your low-level community, the ambassadors will start to rise to the top, and you start picking those people out. Start profiling them, surveying them. What do they have in common? What do they like to do? Where do they work? What do they do in their spare time? How much money do you have? The more kind of insights you can glean from them, the wider the network you can get, and the easier it'll be if you want to break into new markets. So as we started breaking into new markets, we always kind of had a couple of demographic pillars that we always stuck to, and we always chose based not only on population, but also on some of the kind of more logistical demographics. So it has to be an urban central area in terms of population density, in terms of age demographics, gender split, education split. All these elements were taken into consideration when we move into a new city. And we've always seen that whenever we've deviated from those models, it's been a slower grind. And if you're in a community, you don't want the empty room effect. Nobody wants to walk into an empty room and just kind of start shouting. They want to walk into a room, see content is there, see people are doing things, see things are happening, and that's kind of how you get the engagement hook. So in terms of building it out, I guess there are a couple of core things. I just kind of jotted them down, but the audience, the seeding, engagement, marketing, promotion, moderation, repurposing, value, and view. So we'll kind of go through them, but they're kind of the main pillars that you should be looking at as you're kind of building your audience and building your community rather. So the audience obviously is a simple one, but you need to make sure that your targeting is done correctly. Again, think back to your why and think back to the value add. Why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? And where am I doing it? And again, sometimes that might be audience-led. Oftentimes communities have failed because they started on a product or on a platform that wasn't right for their audience, and you may have to pivot. Just think about that. Think about where your audience is already spending their time. Or maybe you want to build something entirely new, but then that's marketing it from zero. So think about how you get those first 100 users, how you start to hit that critical mass, and how you get to that viral quotient, which is 1 for 1. So every time one person joins, they tell one person. If you don't hit that figure, your community is not viral, and the likelihood it'll succeed starts to slow down, particularly if you want to scale. The second thing, obviously, is in terms of seeding. So that's both users. So again, maybe reaching out to your family and friends. Similar, if you're bootstrapping, you would reach out to a family and friends round. Reach out to family and friends, people that you like, the kind of people that you want in your community. Put them in there. Put some content that they're engaged in there. Just simply ask them to get involved. If you're feeling that your group is a bit slow, just nudge your friend and say, hey, look, this article is relevant, I really love you shared. Start asking questions. Seeding that content all the time encourages engagement. The second thing, or the third thing rather, obviously, is around email. So email is kind of the main driver if you're thinking about community. Everyone is always accessing their inbox. I personally have 4 different email inboxes that do very different things, and I'll check each one multiple times every day to make sure that the information that I want is where I want it to be. It's very segmented. I try and keep one at inbox 0, but it's often not. But the idea really is that people want information faster than you can provide it. So if they know something's coming regularly, provide it regularly. If you send out your email blast at 8 o'clock on a Monday, it better be in their email at 8 o'clock on a Monday. If you can't do that, think about automating that process. Use MailChimp. There's plenty of other things like that at the moment that will kind of just do a plug and play solution. And if you can plug and play rather than custom build, do it. There's absolutely no reason at this point, if you're building a community, to have a custom build that you can't just buy off the shelf if you have the money to. It's much faster. Custom builds always end up being much longer and much more expensive than you expected. In terms of the marketing then, again, it's a similar thing. Grinding down that message to getting to the actual core needs of your user. So again, you're answering the question as to why they're there, what's the value that they're getting out of it, why do they want to be part of this community as opposed to spending their time doing something else. Really what you want people to be doing is spending time with you instead of spending time with anyone else. That could be their husband, it could be their partner, it could be their boyfriend, it could be their friends, it could be going to the gym, it could be anything else. You want it to get into that habit-forming pattern of behavior so that when they wake up, they check the community. When they go to bed, they check the community. They're going in and out at different times during the day. If you're having this kind of ebbing and flowing, you need to kind of think about what your community is for. And maybe, like I'm part of multiple communities, some are only operating on one day. So there's one that I'm part of, it only operates for a couple of hours every Sunday morning, and it's kind of a goals thing, but every Sunday morning, you know, for those couple of hours, boom, there's going to be loads of content in there. It's really highly engaged, and that's it for the rest of the week. But I know when I go there on Sunday, there's going to be stuff there. I also know if I dip in and out throughout the week, the content that's going to be there is going to be incredibly high quality, and it's going to be exactly what I want. So that's why I'm part of it. So think about your audience, think about the why for them as well as yourself. The other thing in terms of the moderation then, so this was a tricky one for us in particular because we decided from the very outset that we would be a community for adults. We didn't want this to be a heavily moderated space in terms of you can only talk about particular topics. Our whole thing is that we're an open platform in terms of topic. But obviously when we're creating a community, and our guiding principle is on respect, so that was the culture that we'd set out from the start, which meant that if the content around that didn't really match that, then we were failing our audience and the why was immediately broken. So for us, we started adding the kind of the super users and they started moderating the content. But really we started thinking, well, if someone has a different perspective, does that mean it should be deleted? Or if someone doesn't understand what they're saying is racist, should that be deleted? And as your community kind of grows, you'll start to hit all these pain points where people are, is this educational? Is this just plain racist? What do we do then? So we kind of introduced a 3 strike and you're out system, but each community will have its own kind of ideas and own kind of structures and own kind of pain points as to which works best. But for us, the educational piece was important. So if somebody says something racist and they clearly don't understand why, someone says to them, that's racist, and they double down, no, that's a warning. If you take the time to step back and reflect and say, okay, how is this racist? Can someone please explain? Great, yes we can, and here's how. So it got to the point where we started building out these packs. So we built out packs around LGBT issues and around race issues and around loads of things, and basically our community guidelines are really, really extensive now, but everyone has to adhere to them or otherwise you will kind of be penalized in the way. But it means that we've created a system that effectively works for the majority of people, because when an issue arises, the culture is such that this is a positive space, so people maintain it. And you need to get that point where your community is self-policing. If the culture of your community tips to the other side, you will never get it back. So once things start to go negative, algorithmically, you are just kind of in this downward spiral of this will never, never return. Hate, fear, anger, all those emotions are much more viral than anything positive. That's why your news is often so sensationalized, particularly on social media. And trying to get it back to being a positive once you've allowed something to fester is quite difficult. That's why 4chan is so successful, and it basically is the pits and you should never go there. But if you go to other sites which are much more positive, actually like Happy News, Good News, those kind of places, you will see that the community and the people's responses are much more lighthearted, but they're also much more engaged. There's not this kind of baiting and trolling that you'll find because the community has become self-policing. Discussion is fine, debate is fine, even argument is fine. But you're not allowed to start kind of the nitpicking via our platform, and that's something that we've managed to transplant from Facebook to the app. It was quite difficult moving one platform to the other, and we lost a lot of members on the way, but we kind of had to just make the business decision that no, if we want to scale this as a company, we need to be on our own platform. Because obviously you can only piggyback from someone for so long, and if Facebook decided tomorrow groups are gone, that was over 100,000 members across our whole network just wiped out, that we have no recourse of getting back. There's lots of kind of technical issues if you're piggybacking in tech that you need to think of, but that was kind of the core one for us. But then I guess in terms of the repurposing piece, because you can start to take your good culture and start to spread it out. That's the whole point. Again, it comes back to the why people are there and kind of the adding value. So for us, as I said, that started to be working with other organizations and working with blog content, but also getting our members to be featured on the blog. So we did like an entrepreneur series, we did a blogger of the month series, we kind of had stuff around the mums piece, which even though none of us are mums, we kind of had people interacting and engaging. We asked them questions and repurposed that into blog content. We did live videos off our Facebook, and then we started obviously having the events. So we started hosting events. First of all, initially they were just kind of like, this could be a different way to add value, but they're also a way to add revenue, particularly if you're in the kind of community space. Getting that offline piece is key because it really gets people to kind of engage and gets people feeling that these people are friends rather than just online kind of digital avatars. So for us, the events are kind of focused around two things. They're really focused around education, so information. So a lot of them are panel based. A lot of them are kind of have speakers at all different levels. We've had politicians and cooks and head of content at Twitter and Diageo and all sorts of people. All women. Our speakers are always all female, but we always have it in a space that's very communal feeling. It's easy access. We've set our price point generally very accessible, and we always say if you genuinely can't afford this, we always set aside some free tickets for members who are maybe unemployed or low income, etc. So they can just reach out to us and say, hey, I know there's a pot of tickets, I'd love to avail of one. And again, that's kind of feeding back into the community because actually they are keeping the company going, and without our members we wouldn't have a company. So just repurposing kind of the content that we're creating and the events that we're creating allows us to add additional value, and also allows us to think that we are thinking of the needs of our user and our customer ultimately, because the more eyes in the app, the better for us. The last thing then really in terms of the view. So I think this is kind of one where people have a bit of difficulty around, because if you're thinking of a community, you're thinking of a lot of people and it's all a bit of a mass, and you think that the easiest way to do this is to sometimes just take the middle road and just say, oh, we're trying to please as many people as possible. As your community grows, it's impossible to please everyone. That is just an impossibility. You probably can't even please 5 people. You probably can't please your entire family, and they know you your entire life. So for us, we kind of initially started trying to be really pleasing and, oh, sorry, and yes, and thanks, and no. And then we just said, stop. No, we've decided we're drawing the line, and we are the moderators. We have ultimately the decision in what happens. And because we were able to say that, we were able to create a structured process that our members then were able to familiarize themselves with. And because of our view internally in the app, it was no surprise when we started to take a hard line on stuff outside of the app as well, around the social issues piece and that kind of thing. And that actually attracted a lot of members to us. A lot of people started to see us in a new light. A lot of partnerships started to be built and dissolved around some of the values that we took. So we've been fortunate to be able to work with the likes of Microsoft and Dell and PayPal and all these huge tech companies, because they want to get in front of women. Like, quite callously, that's why they come to us, because we have a lot of women. But we've also had the back end of that in terms of, we used to work with a company in particular, I'm not going to name them, but they basically launched an advertising campaign in another territory that our members really took umbrage at. It was pretty poor, but it ended up in us dissolving the partnership. Now, that some people might say that's a bit foolhardy to be a small startup dissolving a partnership with an internationally known brand, but if we had decided to maintain that partnership, we're immediately going against our why. We're immediately going against our who. We're immediately going against all the pillars that we've set up. Everything, basically everything that we had said is just up in smoke, because it doesn't actually matter. But by taking the stance that we were able to feed back to our customers that, yes, we've taken your feedback on board, we're also not happy with it. We've talked to the team internally. It's not their creative decision, it's a totally different team. And kind of talk them through that process and be transparent about it. That we were able to kind of turn quite a negative situation into quite a galvanizing one for the community internally. And it also had the wider impact that when we fed this back to the PR company of the group that we're working here, they escalated the problem and they decided to kill the campaign. So it was kind of an interesting one in that you would think that people are just like, oh no, it's fine, if it's making money, it doesn't matter. But actually that company realized that we have a huge pile of their core demographic who are really anti the messaging that you've put out. If we're not buying it, then other people aren't buying it. And because of that, we were able to get them to change the campaign. They just cut it short and kind of revitalize some materials from other places around the world. Again, I think that's for us in terms of the repurposing piece, it's the key, because it kind of creates this feedback loop in which you are perpetuating the community, perpetuating the values of the community, but also taking the ear of your customer into account. And that's not to say that you bend to their every whim. Ultimately, you're going to have to make business decisions, and there's going to be many decisions that you will make that they won't like. But for our company, we've always tried to be as transparent as we can around why. Why are we doing this? What's the purpose of this? By doing X, it allows us to do Y. By doing X, it allows us to have the app, have the community, have more people involved. And I think that for us has been some of the kind of most galvanizing issues, because we often have seen that some of the best parts have come out of when the community have come together. So one of my favorites is there's been so many oddball moments in the community, from like there was a mix up with the Tesco on toilet paper in Raheny, so everyone was like, there's really cheap toilet paper in there, and like people were just bombing down and like filling their trolley with it and going out the door like, yeah, it's great, I got like 100 rolls for like £2. But there's been other little things when people were like, there was a woman who was stuck in Japan and she had no one to hang out with, so someone else from another city was coincidentally also in Japan, so they met up for beers. They wouldn't have done that if they wasn't for the community. But my absolute favorite, well, there's two that I guess are the best, but there's one that I absolutely love. Someone found their long lost parent through our group. So we've had so many things where people have lost all sorts of things, from like jewelry and wallets and handbags and all sorts of stuff, and it's posted up, and generally within an hour or so the owner is found. But this, we were all thinking, this is a bit on the edge. You have a grainy picture and a vague name of this guy called John. He was born on X date in Ringsend. That's it. No more information than that. They weren't even Irish or living in Ireland. But they posted in our group, and everyone, you could kind of feel the atmosphere in the group. Everyone was keeping an eye on it, but not really sure where it would go. A couple of hours later, someone commented being like, this looks familiar. That back garden looks kind of familiar. Hang on, I'll ask my mum. I'm like, no, sorry, but I'll ask someone down the road. And you can just see these comments slowly just start to trickle in. And as people get engaged, obviously it's that seeding thing again. So the more engagement there is on the post, the more people are willing it to go in the right direction. And eventually, I think within the day, that person's father was found. Again, that's because of our community. And there's so many other spaces where you've seen lost individuals or lost items or cries for help that have just gone unanswered and unnoticed because people don't care. But by creating a community that's around a singular why, you're able to get people on the same ideology, on a similar wavelength. They don't necessarily have to be in agreement on everything, but the idea is really that they have enough in common that when somebody asks for help, the other people help. And that's really kind of the point of community. It's really the point of network, and it's kind of where social media in general is going. It's definitely breaking down this kind of individual, faceless avatar thing, and it's something that we've purposely put into our app, so we encourage people to use their real full name and their real photo. We don't encourage people to use photos of their dogs or some random picture. It's really about authentic individuals being real online and transplanting that into offline and into online interactions. So I think that's it. But if anyone has any questions, I guess we open it to the floor. For us, really, the more members we can pack in, the better. I know other communities that are like, they're much smaller, but they're in terms of the access, it's much higher. So it's maybe 5,000 to enter and staggered pricing and things like that. But we always have a base model that's free. And that was important to us because of the ethos of the company and why we were doing it. So we started building out brand strategy, we started building out press strategy. Whenever we get press, we see an immediate spike in membership. So we started using kind of some growth hacking techniques around contacting journalists and kind of pushing out that media message. We've been very fortunate that we've gotten some high level press in terms of like CNN, Elle, Vice, all around the world. And it's a kind of a simple enough message that people are able to get on board with it quite easily, and we're able to repackage it in multiple different strands. Because we're not a sports app or we're not a fashion app, we're just an app in general. We kind of lie on that top level, so we're able to segment what we're doing quite handily. And we've had a few kind of coups, I guess, in terms of our team was selected to meet Mark Zuckerberg when we were kind of a good community that came out of Facebook. We've spoken to South by Southwest, and we've done all these things that kind of keep the media interest, because obviously you need to keep the fresh stories kind of coming out. So for us, it was definitely the kind of the media piece is a huge one, the organic piece is a huge one, and kind of encouraging that sharing. So we're still working towards the viral coefficient in terms of the app. We definitely had it on Facebook, but again, that was the moving over platform piece that creates a bridge there. So you need to think about that carefully in terms of future-proofing your community as well.